But that's not all the evidence that there is. There's a third evidence, and that is the evidence of the saints and sages and saviors around the world that have spoken and witnessed and supported the very existence of God. Once again, a lot of these saints and sages lived in all the parts of the world. Long before we developed technology for transportation or for telecommunication or information technology or social media, these guys had no way to coordinate their evidence or to coordinate their accounts. And they were writing at the same time simultaneously and teaching at the same time about the same ultimate reality. From every religion and every spiritual tradition, a mountain of evidence in support of God existed, right? And so people in this throughout human history, they have known, they have believed, and they have taught about God. And many of these saints and sages did so with signs and wonders and tremendous works that followed their testimony about God. Now, although these saints and sages and saviors didn't call God by the same name, they didn't have the same label for God. They spoke various languages and they came from different cultures, but they were speaking about the same ultimate reality, right? And so, depending on where these sages came from, or where these saints came from, or where these holy men came from, they called God by different names. Some of them call God the I Am, right? The Christians, for example, call him the I Am. Jesus Christ called him Father. Jesus Christ referred to God as his Father. He had such a relationship with God that he saw God as his Father. That's a pretty profound imagery. And then the Jewish faith called God the Adonai, or the Yahweh, or the Elohim. And the Persian prophet Zarathustra called him the Ahura Mazda. And then others call him the Wahaguru, or the Guru Deva, or the Brahma, or Shiva, or Vishnu. And then there are some, the mystics, who call him the Beloved, or the Lover. And then some call them the Tien, or the Giche Manitou, or Jah by the Rastafarians, or Allah by the Muslims, or Wakan Tanka, or the Oshala, the Brazilian worshippers down there, or the Yemanja, or the Orisha from the Yoruba tradition. And there's just many names that people have called God. But really, if you scratch the surface of these names, they're actually speaking about the same ultimate reality. They're talking about the Creator. They're talking about God, who pervades all things and who is supremely in charge and sovereign over all the earth, right? And a lot of these sages and saints witness to these gods, or to the reality of God. Many labels, many names, many imagery or metaphor in terms of how they describe God. But really, they were talking about the same thing. Now think about some of these sages. Think about Jesus Christ, the inspiration and the central figure behind the Christian religion. Jesus Christ, as I pointed out earlier on, we will talk about God as Father. I mean, it's sort of like when my son was young, he would call me Daddy, you know. That's a pretty powerful imagery. That Jesus Christ kind of saw God in the same way as my son looked at me. And I cared for him, I loved him, he knew that. And I knew that, and we had a great relationship. Jesus had such a relationship with his Father. And think about how Moses described God. He saw God slightly differently. He didn't always refer to God as Father. And Moses, of course, is the key prophet in Judaism, also a very prominent figure in Christianity, as well as in Islam. But not just that, the Druze and the Baha'i faith and other religions recognize Moses as well. What about the Prophet Muhammad? Blessed be his name. The Prophet Muhammad is the central figure in the Muslim tradition, right? And he saw God slightly differently and may have described him slightly differently. But nonetheless, he's talking about the same ultimate reality. What about that Persian prophet, Zarathustra or Zoroaster? That great prophet, they will catch on fire and people will literally watch him burn. A great man of God, that he spoke about God in very clear terms, where he was describing the same ultimate reality, right? He never spoke to Mohammed or to Buddha or to some of the other Eastern sages, but they had the same idea of God. And may have described God slightly differently, may have spoken about him with different imagery, but it's the same thing they're talking about. Now, when you talk about Siddhartha, that great sage from the Eastern tradition, and the great Buddha, or the Bodhisattva, right? The first Buddha, right? And he wasn't even interested in any level. In fact, he didn't even talk about God as such. He wanted to know, as I pointed out earlier on, about what is the effect. Don't tell me about all this religious dogma and doctrine and belief systems and theology that you have. I just want to see how all of that has affected your life. The Buddha was very, very interested in the effect of your faith, right? He would say, I don't want to hear you quoting all this scripture and reading all this scripture and rattling all the scriptures up. He says, read as few scriptures as you can and quote fewer, but do the right thing. Let us see the manifestation of these scriptures and these truths in your own life. That's what the Buddha would say. And so the Buddha is an interesting figure. He never actually talked about God. He didn't deny God. Absolutely not. He knew that there was God. He came out of the Hindu religion. But he was not interested in all of the ceremonies and all of the dogmas and all of the quibbling that surrounded religion. He wanted to get right smack to the crux of the issue. If you tell me that you know God, does that play out in your everyday life? Can I look at your life and see that your life is transformed? Can I look at your life and see that your life is changed? Can I look at your life and see that you are enlightened? You have attained a higher level of awareness and consciousness. And can I look at your life and see that? See, this is what the Buddha is interested in. He's interested in your mind. How do you deal with the suffering that is so much a part of the world? And he talks about nirvana, how you can transcend the suffering of this world and get to a state where suffering ceases. Because you have control of your mind and you have control of things that happen around you. Because that's what wisdom does for you. And this is what Buddha does. And then, of course, there are other sages like the Rishi Bhanata, the supreme proclaimer in the Jain religion. And then, of course, the Jewish philosopher Maimonides that wrote the book, The Guide to the Perplexed. And then, of course, philosophers like Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and many other philosophers down through history. They probably never talked about God, but they talked about the truth. They talked about the way. They talked about how to actualize a certain level of life that frees you from, all of the vice of this world. You may say, well, those are just philosophers and they didn't talk about God and therefore they don't know God. You'd be sorely mistaken. What does the scripture say? Jesus Christ says that he is the way, the truth, and the life. And what were the philosophers concerned about? Well, they were concerned about the wisdom that teaches you the way, the truth, and the life. In that respect, they were interested in God. They were interested in ultimate reality. That was what they were concerned about. wisdom of God, the truth as it relates to the ultimate reality, and what makes for the good life. That's what the philosophers were interested in.
Okay, that's it for now. Please put down your thoughts, your opinions, and your questions in the comment sections below. Until next time, like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for me. Thank you so much.